It's time for a first impression with the Pimax Crystal Light. This is the latest headset from Pimax. Goes for $600 USD plus a software subscription. I wasn't sure how I felt about the software subscription, but it's so hard to make software and maintain it in an evolving platform. You know, Pimax is much smaller than Valve or Meta, so this kind of makes sense to me that they would move to a model like this. The headset itself, it's a very familiar shape. You guys have probably seen the Crystal before. The Crystal Light is, well, lighter, but also significantly cheaper because it doesn't have some of the key features. So this video, we're going to talk about what those differences are, how it compares to a Valve Index, which I have down here, and a Quest 3, which I have over there. I'll be doing some direct comparisons with this headset. It's new to me. I just got it and I've only worn it about a dozen times. So this is very much a first impression. But I do have some interesting things to talk about, including the tracking, some benchmarks, as you know me. They are specifically with iRacing. It's what I'm most comfortable with and familiar with. So let's dive into that now. The only thing interesting about this unboxing segment is that, as far as I know, this is Amazon retail packaging. This is how you would receive it directly from that distribution. The headset does require wall power, so there are adapters for the wall sockets, a couple cables to charge the USB controllers. I believe they use internal batteries, so if you want to do a quick replacement with AA's or AAA's, you can't do that. The headset does output sound through some built-in speakers, but I mean, I think they're worse than Quest 2 quality, honestly. You can buy the DMAS earphones as an accessory, but lately with VR, I've gotten into using speakers on my rig and just having the radio comms come through on my headset. So from the spotter and whatnot. And I really like that experience. So the standard sound from the Pimax Crystal Light, it's fine for my use case. I've read that the power and USB cable on the headset is not detachable. I did not try yanking on mine to see if that's true, but I'm bound to make mistakes in this first impression. So right now in the top right of your screen, it will be the follow-up video, like I guess my second impressions, and I'll correct any mistakes that I've made from your feedback right there off the bat. For example, I am confused about the IPD range. This is kind of what I found. I just see conflicting reports. So here's the intro for the channel. Shout out to all of those that have supported me so far. If you need help and want direct consultation with your computer or sim, send me an email, benchmarkodysseys@gmail.com. So here are my first impressions with the headset. Where are my gloves? Gloves over here. Okay, so this is my first time using the Pimax Crystal. I did 60 seconds. I have been so wowed by what I'm looking at. I'm like, I've got to join a race. I've joined as a ghost, so I'm at like default graphics. I've done no customization to the Pimax software. I've just plugged it in to go. I'm on Windows 12 or 11, 24H2, 9800X3D, and my 4080 Super. All I've done is I've just jumped in here just to see what it was like. And the clarity inside the car itself, it reminds me of a Quest 3. It's that clear. But what is astonishing is how clear everything else is in the distance. That's what, it's just so sharp. I'm like flabbergasted by it. I'm just running, again, default settings, so I just have a giant virtual mirror at the top here, and I'm waiting for these cars to come through. The clarity in here is absurd. It's absolutely absurd. Here are some pixel densities that I found. I think these are mostly estimates than actual. There's some complicated math behind getting a proper number. Oh my God. It's crazy. It's crazy. And like the trees are so clear and I can see them all the way down to the front, which is just wild to me. All right, we've got a green flag. Cars are coming. Okay, Okay, where are the LM? Oh my god, here come the GT4s. So I don't have trading paints. This is a brand new install, so this is just, everything's normal. Wow. Like I can just see into the wheels looking at the brakes. Oh my god. Let's see, I should have been looking at the road. That's crazy. In my mirror, I could see like his harness and the safety netting in the mirror. What? Oh. Dude, even just this, like, the metal frame overhang of this, it just looks three-dimensional. I don't know how else to describe it. Like, it's crisp. I can see all of the bars and how they're attached. Like, before, I would just look past something like that, but now it's, like, striking to me. Wow. Look how clear the mountains are in the background. The hills, I guess I should say. We've got a good run on this guy. Get out. Crazy. Oh, I have so much fuel on board. Oh, I'm inside the other car. I have noticed like these screens are really close to me and they're black, at least the ones that are off. And it looks like the Pimax has a bit of difficulty with that. I don't have much lighting going on in here. I tried playing around with this room lighting frequency setting. The description does not make sense to me. I don't understand what it's trying to explain. And it didn't fix the tracking issue I noticed with Inside Out. But we'll talk about more of that later. Comfort-wise, the ergo, it's fine. I mean, the headset does feel a little loose. So as I'm talking and moving around a little bit, it seems to be shaking on my head a bit more. But this is just default. This is just what came in the box. I've seen a lot of people like to upgrade this stuff, and I could definitely see that. Another annoyance, I don't know if you guys can see this, it's quite bulky at the back. I don't know how much, this is like an inch and a half. Normally I rest my head back on the headrest. So ergonomically wise, I'm not super excited about that part. I like to, even though I'm a ghost, I like to pretend that I have to drive them clean. I mean, that's what practice is about, right? Anyway, it's a bit abrasive, but I mean, once you get sweat and oil on it from your skin, it usually smooths out. Frame rate wise, it's at 90. I think quad view is enabled. So just there looking to the left, there's a bit of a judder, but I have no idea if that's the Pimax tracking or it's just any of the default settings I'm running. I think smoothing is off by default. Wow, look at the rocks coming back. What? That is outrageous. I had this like instinct I needed to dodge them. Unreal. Just all these things that I would just look past. I wouldn't even notice. And here they are, just dropping my jaw. It seems to have latency that reminds me of a Valve Index. The clarity is Quest 3 here. And then out there, that's wild. Never seen it this clear before. I have no reference point. This is now the new reference point for clarity. So one thing that has me nervous is the lenses are concave, I guess. Which ones? They bubble out. The lenses bubble out. And as someone who wears eyeglasses in my headset, I'm worried about that because I don't want the lenses to hit with my eyeglass lenses. Ooh, we got another run. No, not enough. Oh, someone spun out. Oh, we're gonna... Well, I'm glad to be a ghost right there. We were dead. Like the field of view, the idea that I had my head slightly turned here, and I could see in my rearview mirror. With my Quest 3 and the Valve Index, that is not possible. I would not be seeing into that mirror. I have to turn my head even more with the field of view in those headsets. So to me, that's like an instant like, ooh, this is different. This is better. My subjective opinion in the moment felt very different than what Gaming Nexus has described here with these measurements. So take that with a grain of salt. So cool. I love multi-class. I mean, it just creates opportunities and disappointment for everybody. So it's a great equalizer. Yeah, like left to right. There's definitely a little bit of blur. Afterwards, I switched back to my other headsets. I don't think the Crystal Light is more blurry, but because of how high quality the resolution is, it just feels like that. Oh, look at that GT4 cut across. Gotta be allowed to race your own class. Oh, but the Aston gave up too much space. He's getting passed by this other Porsche. Can I sneak in here? Oh, I gotta run on both of them. Oh, if I wasn't a ghost, I would have stole that. Yeah, I am impressed. Like out of the box for everything just to work. First go on the settings, multi-class feel at Catalunya. I am impressed with this, I have to say. It makes me excited to VR race again. The next thing I want to talk about is tracking. When I had this originally configured, especially with my valve index, I would put the Lighthouse up here on that camera stand, and it's about 2 to 3 feet away from my head. This worked fine for the valve index, and I thought it would be okay with the Crystal. It's not. That is too close. So what I had to do is take the Lighthouse and move it all the way up to the top part of my shelf where it's looking down at us now. Hello. That provides much better tracking up there. So it is possible to have your lighthouses too close or in a position where it doesn't work as well as it should with the Pimax Crystal. The next thing I want to show is a rudimentary test that I did with tracking. This is like super basic. The main reference is at the top. That's the valve index running with Lighthouse tracking. Underneath on the bottom is Pimax Crystal Light with inside out tracking. It's using 4 cameras situated on the faceplate to detect where the headset is in the environment and what's around it, and to give it referenced for the digital world. And with this simple testing configuration, I think you can see a bit of a wobble when it comes to the inside-out tracking. It's much less noticeable when you're wearing it and you're breathing and you're moving, and in my case, fighting force feedback, but stationary, it is present. And then I switched over to Pimax using the Lighthouse tracking. So in order to do this, you need the Lighthouse faceplate, a separate accessory. So if you own Lighthouses because you had a valve index like I did, you just switch out the faceplate that came with the Pimax Crystal Light, you put this one on, and then all of a sudden it's tracking just like a valve index. When installed, you can just use the software and switch between the inside-out tracking and the Lighthouse tracking. You don't have to change it again. I bought this for day one testing because I knew it was going to be one of the first questions you guys would ask, and I think the results speak for themselves. Flipping back over to the comparison shot, here we're seeing the index at the top again with Lighthouses, and now the Pimax using the Lighthouses. To me, the tracking looks super similar. There's not much of a difference between the two. Using the Lighthouses with the Pimax means that any obstruction, physical obstruction between it and those sensors will result in head loss tracking, but it seemed to be a more stable experience when I was racing around. And in this example of it just sitting there doing nothing, it also looks more stable than inside-out tracking. If you have a better idea on how to test this, I welcome that. Just post it in the comments below and I'll give it a go. By the way, I also did the Meta Quest 3 with the same stability test, and it actually looked better than both the Valve Index and the Pimax Crystal Light. With the light, I tried moving it in different parts of the room. I tried turning off my force feedback motor and other electronics. I changed the lighting. I covered up my monitors. I did a whole bunch of things to try and get the inside-out tracking as good as the Quest 3, and it's just not. With the Crystal Light, I never felt like it bothered me, but I did notice it, and that's why I did this test, just to prove my own sanity, I guess. I am somebody who is prone to motion sickness in a VR headset, and it never made me sick, but I will be using Lighthouses moving forward. Benching the Pimax Crystal is a little more difficult than the Valve Index. That's because it uses Pimax Play. It also does support Steam VR, but there's a performance impact in doing so. So you guys have seen my previous videos where I use fpsVR, which gives us lots of analysis. However, for this comparison, I'm just going to be using the RGT metrics within the overlay of iRacing. You can see this, what do they call it? The F-box, I think it is. Yes, meter box. There we go. You can see the meter box. And the R value generally represents CPU frame time. It will be locked at 11 or 11.1 because I'm using OpenXR. So that means we're kind of left with the G value, which is going to be basically the graphics card milliseconds to render. It's similar to what fpsVR puts out. Then there's the T value, which is basically what it thinks is the total time it took from the call to the completion of the render. That's also with a grain of salt. These things are useful, but they're not necessarily accurate depending on your configuration and your setup. So we're going to do a side-by-side comparison showing 4 different scenarios. So I've got 4 meter boxes here synced up with the feed you see beneath. System specs are in the bottom left. Note that I'm using SteamVR 274 because I have issues with both GeForce and Radeon using the latest, and OpenXR Toolkit is disabled. I kept the same render resolution across all 4 meter boxes. In total, it should be about 13.3 million pixels. Starting with the left meter box, this is the Crystal Light running Pimax Play with inside-out tracking. Notice how it's jumping around a little. Then we have Pimax Play just using the Lighthouses, but SteamVR is not active, it's closed. To the right of that is Pimax plus SteamVR. So I have SteamVR using the Pimax Crystal Light as if it's a Valve Index. This is a feature that's been supported by SteamVR for a while. And then finally, on the right-hand side, we have the Valve Index, which is obviously using Lighthouses. And I've adjusted its resolution, so it should be the same load for that headset as the Pimax Crystal Light. The iRacing meter box does not suggest a disadvantage or advantage to using inside-out tracking or Lighthouses with Pimax Play. But if you want to use SteamVR with the Crystal Light as a native headset, I believe you need to run both pieces of software, and that produces the worst results. I'm also not sure why the Index is showing a higher T value compared to the Pimax Crystal that's also running SteamVR. There must be something else going on here, so post a comment if you know. Next, I decided to compare these 2 scenarios because they're both using SteamVR, which lets me use fpsVR and make these graphs, which I've shown in the past. What I want to do here is validate the results that were shown in the simulator by iRacing's built-in meter box, which I'm going to keep at the top. First, we're looking at CPU frame time. This is the area chart. It's a distribution that we want all of the data points to be to the left of the 90 Hertz line. And I'm comparing the Valve Index to the Crystal Light. Index is purple, Light is green. The 9800X3D handles this scenario and these headsets in SteamVR flawlessly. These results are great, even suggesting we can push 120 Hertz because all data points are to the left of the 8.3 millisecond line, which designates 120 Hertz. But performance is better with the Index. When we flip over to the graphics card frame time, it's a different story. We see a clear separation between the frame times, a major advantage to the Index. Assuming I have set this up correctly, big assumption here. Assuming I have, though, there is a significant penalty to running Pimax as attempting to run Pimax as a native headset in a SteamVR environment. An alternative explanation could be barrel distortion, that the full resolution being rendered by Pimax is bigger than what's needed for the Index. You can see the resolution I selected in the software, but still behind the scenes, it could be bigger than that. I'm not sure how to investigate that. Please post a comment if you know. My user experience in the headset with the Crystal Light running as a SteamVR headset, it was great. I had no tracking issues. The latency was fine. It's a good experience. It's just, if you don't have the GPU headroom available, like this chart is showing, I was at the limit in this benchmark. That's when you're going to have issues. This benchmark also let us compare the meter box and iRacing to fpsVR results. I think the data results are similar, although It looks like the iRacing milliseconds are reporting a little bit lower than what fpsVR did. If you'd like to learn more about this benchmarking technique, check out this video. I dive into some detail here, specifically with iRacing, but the explanations of graphs are relevant to everything. As I get some practice in with another GT4 Ghost race, it didn't help, by the way. I crashed in the second lap of my league race. Anyway, let's talk about some conclusions here. From a benchmark perspective, we're in a bit of a conundrum. I would love to keep using fpsVR because of the insight it gives us with all of these charts and the data it tracks. This allows me to do those big comparisons where I compare multiple CPUs and multiple graphics cards. But what I just showed is a potential overhead issue when running Pimax Play and Steam VR at the same time. Ergonomics out of the box, they're pretty good. I would say it's much better than a Quest 3, which is basically painful, for me at least. But I have to say, ergonomics, that's totally a personal experience to your head and your face, right? So to me, is there a bit of light bleed from the side of the gasket? Yes, if there's a bright light behind me, it creeps into the headset. But that's my head. It might not happen with you. One universal complaint, though, is the bulkiness of that rear head strap. You can clearly see it here. I'm curious if anyone has done any mods out there or are familiar with any third-party products that can replace that bulkiness, because for an endurance event, if it's 3 a.m. in the morning and I'm like into my second stint, I can't wear this headset. I need to be able to rest my head back on the chair itself. The biggest strength to the Pimax Crystal Light is probably the screens. I mean, you guys saw my first impressions. That was genuine. Compared to a Quest 3 and a Valve Index, it's outstanding on this headset. And I'm also going to make a bold claim here. I think if you reduce the render quality to as low as 0.5, I still think that's better than a Quest 3 and a Valve Index. You're going to run into some aliasing issues, so you're going to need MSA a 4 times or something like that, but I think it's better than those headsets still. The trade-off with the screen clarity and the special lenses is chromatic aberration. This is where there's a slight separation of the colors, especially at the edges of the screens. So here is a through the lens photo that I took with my Samsung phone. And if I zoom in, this gives you an idea of what the clarity looks like. The blurriness is from my camera, not from the headset. And then if we kind of send this up to the top right where there's the little exit button, here you can see that separation in color. This is what it looks like on a monitor, but obviously the image from the VR headset is significantly compromised because it's very difficult to get my camera to focus up there. Regardless, I think you can still see what I'm talking about. I do not think this is a deal breaker, but some of you might be more sensitive to this, especially in flight sim when you have dials and gauges everywhere. With this simplistic testing, I showed that the inside-out tracking doesn't seem to hold as steady compared to the competition like a Quest 3 or using the Lighthouses. This may be unique to my testing environment, but I tried a whole bunch of different combinations and it was present in all of them. In practice, it is much more difficult to notice it, but if you are sensitive to this kind of thing or motion sickness, you might notice it more so than others. The Pimax Play software is basically on par with all the other software that I used before, which means it's quirky, it's got a few bugs, you just have to learn how to press the right buttons at the right time. For example, if you want to use the Lighthouse faceplate, you also need to have a controller that's being picked up by the sensors. I don't know if it's triangulation or something going on. And when that controller shuts off because you're not using it, you're using your peripherals, it actually causes an FPS dip and the whole system gets laggy until you clear it. There is a monthly subscription involved with these new Pimax headsets, and I would expect that to translate into better software as the months go by. The Pimax Crystal Light is also lacking some features. That's why it is half the price as the upcoming Crystal Super. I mean, just looking at all of these features makes me a little dizzy. It's also $1,800 USD. It's promising a lot. It's on pre-order, and I don't think it has a release date yet. A good GPU is critical for good VR performance, and I will be doing some benchmarking coming up with the following graphics cards. I'm still new to the Pimax software. I haven't explored all of its features, so I've got a lot to learn yet, but I will get you guys benchmarks as soon as I can. Meanwhile, if you've seen enough already and you're like, you know what, I'm in, I want a Crystal Light, check it out. I've got a referral link in the description below. You save 3%, I get a small kickback, which is gonna go into the piggy bank for that 5090, which who knows, maybe I'll get it in 2027 at this point. I hope you enjoyed the video, like and subscribe, and I'll catch you next time.